Welcome to Access and Conversation, Deconstructing the Norms, with Jennifer Archibald and company dancer Bradford. Today's guest, Jennifer Archibald, is the resident choreographer for Cincinnati Ballet. She has choreographed for the Atlanta Ballet, A-Lead 2, Kansas City Ballet, Sacramento Ballet, Ballet Nashville, and Grand Rapids Ballet. Next season, she will create new works for Ballet West, Ballet X, Richmond Ballet, and Ballet Austin. She has worked commercially for Tommy Hilfiger, Nike, and MAC Cosmetics, as well as for chart-listed singers and actors. She was the movement director for Shakespeare Theatre Company DC and is currently faculty at the Yale School of Drama and Columbia Barnard. Learn more about Jennifer by visiting her website at www.jenniferarchibald.com. Thank you, and please join me in welcoming Jennifer Archibald and Bradford Chin in conversation.
Hello, Jennifer. Thanks for speaking with us today. It's been a while since we've last seen you, actually. Looking back, and it's 9 months since you were with us at Axis. So how are you? How are you doing with the pandemic?
It's a rough time. I'm based in Brooklyn. So I had actually was working with Sacramento Ballet on the West Coast before it began. So the goal was for me to get back to Brooklyn without being stopped or being quarantined in some random state. But yeah, it's just been a huge shift. I haven't been on the subway in 9 weeks. And, you just have to kind of adapt to a different lifestyle. And the news can kind of take over your life if you're sitting there watching it. It's a tough time. For the first 3 weeks, I just didn't really know how to handle it. I just, all of your commissions and all of your, your gigs are disappear. And then like every other day, you get a new email saying that we can't have you come in and we have to reschedule. And then nobody knows when to reschedule. So I'm sure, there's artists and teachers that relate to that. That's just what the reality of it is. And I don't know, it's a new lifestyle. But it's definitely taking a toll on artists, and it's been hard mentally and physically for me, and I know for many of my colleagues.
Right. And we're kind of finding ourselves in this really unprecedented time, and like you mentioned, for artists especially, it's a lot of people have found themselves come to this grinding halt where they can't create, they can't rehearse. And I think one of the things that has really always inspired me with you is how prolific you are as a choreographer, and also how prolific you are in promoting yourself and your work and making sure that your work is being seen by people. And even in these uncertain times, you've now begun a new dance project, Essential Dance Artists. And I was wondering if you could maybe share a little bit about that.
I mean, the real reason why Essential Dance Artists came into fruition is because within 2 weeks of this COVID, social media became saturated with Zoom classes, whether it was working out classes or whether it was dance classes. And when I've been in New York City for more than 15 years, and working at Steps on Broadway or Broadway Dance Center or Perry Dance, you're used to this lifestyle where you can walk in and then there's 30 or 40 dancers in the room, and it's just this, like, the energy is different. And I take pride in creating a class where I create an environment, and it's like this really, it's a physical exchange, but it's also an emotional exchange. And I want to, create, I don't want people to just come and learn a combination and leave. I want them to feel that they've paid for an experience. And wasn't comfortable in teaching on Zoom. I didn't know if that was going to fulfill me artistically. So I had called one of my dancers to rehearse a combination. And I said, yeah, we'll just stick it on Instagram. But I just really felt the need that I needed to be in rehearsal. And she said at the end of the hour, she said, you know, I really miss being in rehearsal. And that was really the kind of, that's what launched the idea. I just felt like there's got to be a lot of dancers who are sitting there in their apartments just wanting to be in a rehearsal atmosphere. And that's what created Essential Dance Artists. I just felt like I should have started contacting dancers who I knew, but also who I didn't know. And that was really what was awesome about it, because I started looking for dancers on social media in different countries to see if they would choreograph, to see if they would work with me as I choreograph routines on them. And that was fulfilling because I'm meeting people who I've never met before. And I'm also learning about my work, like why do certain dancers look good doing my movement versus someone else? And then also, you know, just taking a moment to check in with someone who I've never met before and what it's like for them to experience COVID in Africa or in Rotterdam or in Australia. And it kind of gave me a reason to wake up in the morning, because in all honesty, it was rough to wake up when you know that there's no work. That's really the reality of this, right? You don't know how are we going to be making money as a freelance artist? And it was rough. The first 2 weeks, I think I was in denial about what was really happening. And I think at the end of the day, I just knew that I needed to create to kind of keep myself sane throughout these 9 weeks.
So as you've been working with these dance artists through Essential Dance Artists, and with your work as a whole, as you pull from like the ballet and hip hop vernaculars, like you shared with us when you were working with us that you trained with both Ailey and did your hip hop training outside of Ailey simultaneously. And definitely working with you, it's very apparent that both of them occupy very large parts of your dancing self. When you were pursuing both of them simultaneously, like what parts of you were they fulfilling, and what different parts of you were they fulfilling?
That's an interesting question, because when you create, it's not necessarily, oh, this is my time to create a hip hop part and this is my time to create a more contemporary aspect of my work. You know, I've spent years trying to fuse both aesthetics for so many years that for me, it's really just having an emotional, artistic release in my body that I can share with another human body. And I don't really think necessarily genre when I am choreographing, even though I know that that's what my choreographic voice is. You know, I'm aware that I am able to slot those different genres into different places as I'm painting, because that's how I describe what I do. But I didn't necessarily think about that. That really wasn't the mission. The mission for me was, I feel like choreographers have to have like some sort of physical release, and that's really what was happening in that exchange.
So were you ever then able to find performance work that offered you that same kind of release as you were trying to find different forms?
What do you mean performance work? What do you mean by that?
I guess because as like the trajectory of your career has largely been based in your work as a choreographer and an educator.
Yes.
And I think with the work that you've created, it has inarguably a very unique style and has paved the way, I think, for other people coming in behind you. So I'm wondering then if there were other people whose work you were able to perform, which fed that need for this physical release.
You mean if there was choreographers that I looked up to? Is that what you mean? Oh, wow. Okay, so that's okay. You know what I'm going to say? I fell in love with a company coming out of Montreal called La Human Steps. And it's a company that has high physical contact work. And they had ballet dancers that were on point sometimes. And they had, you know, it wasn't necessarily hip hop, but I would say that they were showcasing ballet on such a ferocious, high physical level. And every single step was unexpected that it kind of, I would just watch these videos and sometimes you have to just press pause and figure out how they even got into it. You know, there's those pieces that you see where you just don't even know how it was created. And that is definitely a company that I looked up to for years. Unfortunately, they don't exist anymore. But I'm telling you, I think they were a company that led a lot of the high physical work that we see today.
So you have, I guess, a very, would I be correct in saying a really small number of people who have been able to kind of serve as lighthouses for you as you've navigated through your career?
Mm-hmm. You mean dance-wise, so dancers that work with me?
Yeah, dancers who work with you, or companies and choreographers who you've looked up to or even kind of looked to for advice as you've shaped your own aesthetic?
I mean, I think, you know, when you go through the Ailey School, it's very clear what modern training and what ballet training you're receiving. And I think when you are trained in these categories and you have a mind that wants to blend and create and transform these traditional ways of moving, that's when your voice begins to develop. You either have that mind where you want to start creating and start to experiment how these movements can not be as traditional, or you decide that you want to dance for somebody and you just receive material and you execute. And that's not my personality, nor is it my mission as a choreographer. I even, you know, I put a lot of pressure on myself when I create generally. If I see something on video that I've already seen before, I go back to the hotel rooms and I try to figure out how I can make that change. And I go back into rehearsal and there'll be shifts in the movement. I tape everything that I do, and I think it's important for me to make my work as unique as possible and make sure that I'm just not shooting out the same material as I did before. As far as dancers are concerned, you know, to find a dancer that is versatile has always been important to me, and it's been different. I would say it's been challenging, but I do think that now in conservatory training, you see dancers that are much more versatile than they used to be. And that's also because we're also dealing with a period of time where hip hop is much more popular than it was 15 years ago. So I could have a classically trained dancer now who is familiar with the aesthetic. And then I may have a ballet dancer now who is more than familiar, because the goal is for them to not mimic. We want to be creating work as authentic as possible within the aesthetics that we're trying to execute.
So I think it sounds like what you're saying is, through your career, it's been kind of this really large, grand experiment that's ongoing, and the materials that you're working with, whether it's the setting, the space, the time period, the dancers you're working with, they've all changed in the course of your career.
Yes.
And it's really allowed you.
Absolutely, they've definitely played, you know, the history, the type of training, the dancer, the time where we are at in pop culture have definitely affected my ability to choreograph in regards to what type of dancer has been molded in front of me. And there's definitely truth to that, because of, when I went to Ailey, they hadn't offered a hip hop curriculum. And then when I began teaching at Columbia, it was the first time that they wanted to offer hip hop, and it was because students were asking for it. So, it's just, it takes time. Ballet has been ballet is traditional. Dance can be very traditional. And I think, in time, that's what part of the evolution of dance is, and that's what makes dance so exciting.
So you teach hip hop at Barnard, Columbia.
Yes.
And at Yale, you teach drama students.
Yes.
Yes. Drama students, are you also teaching them hip hop, or are you teaching them other things related to their craft?
Actually, I'm not teaching them hip hop at all. After I went to Alvin Ailey, I had gone to acting school, and I had studied the Meisner technique, and acting was a huge part of my life after Ailey, and I realized the importance of good acting training while you're training as a dancer. And it began to change my ability to teach and to choreograph and to move. And I think it is an essential part of performing that I think sometimes young dancers don't realize how important it is to be able to hold a stage physically, but also emotionally, and projection is obviously extremely important. There's a reason why we will look at one dancer versus someone else on stage. I look at the work that I do at Yale as script analysis of movement, and it's storytelling through your bodies, and being extremely present and understanding how to hold emotion through your body, and also being able to build the largest vocabulary we can possibly come up with your body, with your able body, to create emotion.
So in working with your students, you mentioned there's certain things that young dancers might not be aware of, especially as they prepare for these careers in the arts, whether it's dance or theater or a combination of the two. And I know for me, something that I wasn't acutely aware of coming through school was how many chapters are involved throughout the course of a career. There was an awareness of it, but it wasn't something that someone had told to me explicitly. And for you, as you teach your students in these institutions or in your open classes, what goals did you have when you were first starting your career, and what lessons did you learn? What goals changed leading up to where you are now?
What goals did I have? I mean, I never look at myself as though I've made it. I've always said, okay, I really want to choreograph for this company. Hopefully I can make that happen. Or I want to be able to choreograph and tour. And I remember feeling a sense of accomplishment when I was on a plane going to China. And there's these little ongoing goals that you set ahead of you, and I think you have to have a lot of drive in this game, because there's so many highs and lows in this industry. And I've always wanted to choreograph for the Oscars, and I've always wanted to, I used to tell people that I wanted to choreograph for Broadway, but I wanted to choreograph a show that had a story of history or of substance to it. And I don't know, I think going through the commercial industry into concert dance was interesting because sometimes, you know, I have young dancers that say, well, I just want to get paid for dance, and that paid to dance. And that was actually, that never came out of my mouth. I never once said, I just want to be paid. And it was really about creating art that was going to be remembered and learning from different artists something that what can you bring what can you bring to this rehearsal process that I have never learned before. And that was actually more important to me than anything else. It was important for me to create work where an audience could leave the theater and remember it more than 48 hours after. So I just, you know, the goals never end for me. And I think people would probably, you know, I know a lot of people who are in my close circle describe me as a workaholic and someone that just never stops, and I'm always on planes. And I think that's what even makes this COVID experience even more interesting, because I am in one spot. And this is the first time I've been in one spot for this long. And it's been a lot mentally, because I just feel like I'm antsy. You know, I have to be doing something. Like, how productive have I been today? And it's been tough. But no, the goals never end. But I don't think we are working in an art form or in a career that allows that. You know, when you choose to be a freelance artist, because I'm not full-time necessarily at any institution, you are constantly hustling and making sure that you're still receiving contracts. That's just the nature of what I've signed up to do personally. And the goals can't end.
Well, I do want to reassure you that I think your goal of wanting to impart upon audiences something that they'll remember more than 48 hours after the performance. I do think that you've been successful with that. My partner's parents flew from Florida to Austin when we were there in February to see the performance.
Oh, wow.
He was on the phone with them last week, and they actually still remembered your work in that program. So
that's nice to hear.
We're not dancers either, so I know that you have definitely achieved that much, and I didn't need their validation to know that as well.
Oh, that means a lot. See, that makes me smile at the end of the day. You just, you want to make work that resonates. So yes, thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. When you were there with us in the studio last August, 9 months ago, these lessons and goals that have come up for you throughout the course of your career so far, what things came into play and during that process?
I think I remember the first 2 days of rehearsal with Access. I was stressed in the sense of, I don't think I was relaxed. I felt like I had to change phrase work or move things around because I wasn't sure what the dancers in the company were able to do versus not. And I think when you are in a mindset of what can't happen, it kind of pauses your flow. It's the same as writer's block. And once I started getting more comfortable with the dancers and also working with the rehearsal director, I needed to realize that I needed to choreograph as I always do, where I just walk into the room with the concept and let it flow and paint. And if something can't happen, then you'll let me know. And that's exactly how I work with every other company across the US. So why wouldn't I do it now? And it definitely was a revelation that just because you are working with Access Company with different bodies and different abilities, it should not stop you from being able to execute what you are truthfully trying to do. And that's kind of, that's my, that's my MO. Like if I need to be able to truthfully release the emotion physically, and there's really nothing around it that should stop that process. And by Wednesday, I felt much more comfortable. By Wednesday, I was on a roll. I was like, all right, this is what's going to happen. So can you figure it out? And all of you were able to, all of you managed, and you made it happen. And I think there was a shift for me. I don't know if there was a shift for all of you, but there was definitely a shift that happened where I was like, I forgot my groove back. I'm able to make this happen.
I was stressed. I don't know about the other dancers. Like, we had like little conversations, like, oh, how are you doing? But I was stressed, I think, past Wednesday. So I think that was apparent for you, though. I was like very stressed. I really do appreciate what you said, though, about, you know, if there is this authentic voice that's trying to be heard, there isn't really anything that should stand in the way of that voice being heard. And being able to work with you for those 2 weeks, and looking at the work and how we've evolved it between each other as we've performed it on our various tours, I think it's very apparent that your voice is in that work between all of our different bodies and our ability to work as an ensemble. Your voice is there. And I think that stress that you alluded to at the beginning, where you were worried about what we couldn't do as opposed to what we could do, I think is really telling about what happens on a broader scale in dance and why it's so inspiring, quote unquote, for people to see Axis. And I put inspiring in quotes because that is exactly what's told to us. And I think something that the dancers we all talk about is that even though Axis is in its 33rd season, we're not new. Audience members still view us as a new phenomenon, a novel idea. And from your time working with us and creating work with us, what do you think that might say more broadly about the state of dance? That even though we're so far into our existence, that this is still viewed as groundbreaking?
I think as a choreographer, walking into the rehearsal process with Access, you're walking into unknown territory. And when you are not, I personally do not have a relationship with, I don't have a history of working with professional dancers with any sort of disability. And for me to experience that was groundbreaking artistically. And it's just because you just never were put in that situation. And it's not in front of you all the time. And when you are in this experience and you have to create the best work that you possibly can and not look at it as anything else but movement and dance, you start to look at what the purpose is. Like, why are you really here to create work? And what do you really, really want to achieve as an artist? And whether you have a dancer with a disability or a dancer who does not have a disability should not make a difference in the art, because art is such a universal language and the audience should just be responding to what they're seeing on stage as something that's beautiful or something that's life-changing or something that, you know, that just keeps you engaged. And I think the dance world is always interested in seeing something that they've never seen before. And I just think it is a testament as to, there are some producers that do produce the same companies all the time because they know that they are going to sell season tickets and they have to keep their numbers up, and they may not want to take a chance on something that is something that's different, or something that's different and really, really good. And I think it's just like anything else, you have to knock on these doors and hopefully the producer will open it. I think audiences are ready to see more interesting subjects on stage. And I just think that it's been a long time coming, and change happens slowly. But I do think change is happening, and I do think that when you have a dance company that's like Access, that is creating strong work on stage, and that's the key, to make sure that you're presenting work that's good, then you will get the support from the arts world that you're seeking. And I think it's happening because as a choreographer, you want to create on companies that are going to, the more performances they have, the more exposure as a choreographer I'll receive. I mean, Access Dance Company has been everywhere this year. And I have to say that your ability to tour is changing dance and changing the view of dance and changing audiences' opinions. And that's, as I said, you have to make small goals and keep pushing, and you don't stop. And when you don't stop, and that's when people start to open their eyes and they start to realize that this is going to be something that we need to really, we really need to be watching.
And I hope you know that you are a large part of that change, whether it's the change that Access is helping create in the dance world, or if it's your own work too. You are one of the driving forces of this change that we're seeing in dance. And I wonder if, as you consider the trajectory of your career so far, and the change that you've been able to help push forward, I guess the last thought I'm curious to hear from you is what things you want to continue seeing change, what things should change, what things can change, what things will change.
That is a very long answer. I read a thesis on that question. What I will say to you, in short, is that I think artists should share a responsibility of making art with a statement. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a political statement, but I do think it's important that we say something. And it's hard for me to go through or witness social media feeds and see these 30-second videos of movement that doesn't necessarily say anything, but maybe just really fantastic physical movement. And I am questioning whether we might be moving backwards artistically, if we are not continuing to challenge our audiences and making our audiences continue to think and make sure, I just feel that we need to make sure that our audiences know that that dance is an art form that has the fuel and the power to speak volumes. And sometimes that is not able to transfer through social media, and that worries me. That's all I got for you in regards to that.
I really appreciate that. And I think to tail off of that and to kind of finish, I think a personal goal of mine in producing work that is meaningful. Cox, who is the dean of American Dance Festival, I remember something that she said was that a goal of hers was to create a meaningful work that spans the length of a pop song, or 3 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I think the through line through all of this, what we've talked about today, what people are doing around the world in dance, is trying to create art that has meaning and art that can reach people for change. Again, like I said, I think you're definitely doing it. You're a part of the Access story, and I know I'm really appreciative of this time that we've had with you, that I got to work with you as well.
Thank you. No, it was an honor to work with Access. You always want to create work where you are building relationships, but you're also learning about your art form and you create. And that was definitely that experience when I was in Oakland, and I appreciated that.
Thank you so much, Jennifer.
Thank you.